Okay, Chair, you're live on YouTube whenever you're ready.
Welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board ad hoc. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedure apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the chair. While members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? We'll go to the agenda. Have we got any apologies for absence?
None received, Chair.
Any declarations of interest? No. Everybody received the minutes of the last ad hoc scrutiny panel, which was held on the 23rd of November 2020. And can we agree them? Right. Has Tony arrived? Oh yeah, Tony. Can I just introduce Tony Parkinson, the Chief Exec, and the Head of Marketing and Communications, Andrew Glover, who's going to give us a general overview of how marketing and communications work is delivered. So I'll hand over to Andrew, who's going to give us the presentation on the Marketing and Communications Delivery Plan 2021 to 2024. And can I ask members to refrain from asking questions till the presentation's finished? Thank you. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just share my screen now. Okay, so I know you've received a copy of this in advance, so I'll just try and fill in a few gaps as we go, and then leave time for plenty of questions on this or related matters. The background to this new delivery plan is that it will go hand in hand with the refresh of the strategic plan, which is obviously out for public consultation at the moment and will be subject to approval in due course. My team has a strong desire to work to more of a plan where possible. Due to the nature of a lot of our work, we do get a lot of reactive requests. We often have to work at pace in response to things as they happen. But we feel with a delivery plan such as this in place, it'll allow us to prioritise our work better, and crucially, it'll give us a better balance of communications as well across those strategic priorities. So if you think about what our objective is as a team, I think it's dead simple. I think you just boil it down to that. We're here to demonstrate how the council is delivering the strategic plan on behalf of the residents and businesses of Middlesbrough. Those proposed strategic priorities will be familiar to you all. Obviously, it's proposed that the people, place and business banners remain, and those are the 9 proposed strategic priorities. I mentioned about getting a balance of communications. I think one thing that this will hopefully achieve is make sure that we are talking about the progress and the achievements that we're making under all of those headers. So at the moment, I think it would be a fair point to suggest that we probably do more on some of those subjects than others. And it's one of my aims to balance that out as we move on. We think about our strategy then of what we need to do. Ultimately, we want to create positive perceptions about Middlesbrough and about the council. And I think those positive perceptions have got to come at different levels. So I think our work starts with our staff and with our members, who can be ambassadors for the council and ambassadors for Middlesbrough. And once we work at that level, we obviously move out regionally and ultimately nationally into the wider world. The aim is that all of our work will link back to the strategic plan, and we will drip feed our activity over the days, weeks and months to raise awareness of what the council is doing and how it is delivering. How are we going to do that? I want us to operate really and get into the mindset of being a publisher and almost extend our activities beyond the council and think of ourselves as a PR agency for Middlesbrough. Our approach to media relations, or the press office, as you might recognise it, will evolve into a digital news service, again led very closely by the strategic priorities and linked ever closer to what we do from a marketing campaign point of view. That approach to digital news will see us do more on the day-to-day activities of the council. It doesn't always have to be the big ticket items that we talk about. You know, staff around the council will do things without even realising that are just part of their, you know, day-to-day tasks that we can publicise and show how we are delivering for Middlesbrough. We will work with all the directorates on a work plan or a publishing schedule that are linked to their priorities. And we'll use social media more than we do at the moment, and in a slightly different way as well. I want us to be friendly as often as we're functional on there. Now, clearly, we'll always have straight and important information that we've got to provide to people. We'll continue doing that, but we can also be more relatable and show off our human side. I think it's not always going to be about media releases, but when we do use media releases, we need to ensure that they are packaged for digital platforms and packaged for the way that people publish now in the publishing industry. And we've got some examples of those in a moment. And it all will come back to this idea that we need to have a near constant drip of evidence and examples of what we're doing. The next few slides have just got a few examples of some early moves towards this kind of approach. So the top left one there is just a simple picture. Two of our team, Gary and Derek, they are in that instance the human side of the council, showing what they do as part of their day-to-day role. The top right is an example of the council just getting involved in a big conversation that was popular on social media back in June around a big charity football match that was being planned at the Riverside. And the bottom example goes back to the point that I made about us extending our activities beyond those of the council. So we're congratulating Charles Clinkard, who got some national recognition from Which magazine. We're asking residents to get involved and talk about their memories of a great Middlesbrough business, and that was really successful. And is exactly the kind of thing that I think the council should be doing on top of its own important normal business. Talks about packaging media releases. The top example goes back to when we came out of the first lockdown and just slicing and dicing information really that people need to know. I think going back a few years, both ourselves as a council and the end publisher would have packaged that very differently, and it would have just been a straight chunk of words with a couple of pictures. We need to realise that the way that people consume news is changing, and we are changing hand in hand with that. It's not all about snippets of information, though. The bottom example was a feature of around 2,000 words, I think, in the end, and it was with an academy school in Middlesbrough, shining a light on the great work that they were doing to keep children and staff safe during an earlier stage of the pandemic. Again, not strictly council business because it was an academy school, but that's us highlighting positive things that are going on around Middlesbrough. The final examples are just from a week or so ago, and again, it's talking about how we can package things up. So the piece on the left was simply a recap on progress with developments that are underway or due to submit a planning application in Middlesbrough, and the right-hand example is just to show a way how we can break that up on our own social media. So we honed in on the planning approval for the urban farm. You might not be able to see the numbers there, but if you can, or indeed I'll tell you that it reached over 23,000 people on Facebook, over 1,200 people engaged with it. Really good result, a positive example of the change that is coming to the town. So that's how we're going to adopt or adapt rather our approach to news and digital news. We obviously do a lot of campaign work as well, whether they be promotional campaigns or behaviour change campaigns. So obviously a big push over coming months will be around recycling. We need to ensure that those campaigns work hand in hand with what we do from a news point of view. They'll feed each other, they'll allow us to be proactive, get on the front foot and provide lots of follow-ups about what we're doing. When we talk about style, I think it's really important that we remember exactly who we're working for, and that comes down to the words, the phrases that we use. I've said there that words and phrases that wouldn't be used in an average Middlesbrough home or pub or gym class should become off limits to us. We need to ditch the acronyms, the abbreviations, and speak how ordinary people speak. Our key messages, well, we have messages for a range of people. If you already live here, then we want to show how you can be part of an exciting future. We want to attract investors to the area, people who work here but don't live here. We want to encourage them to spend more time in Middlesbrough and potentially come and live here as well. And I think it's key that we focus on what's happening now and what's coming around the corner as we attempt to change those perceptions, because there are lots of projects underway. There are lots of things that will come to fruition over the coming years, and we need to keep banging the drum as often as we can about those. Our approach is going to be increasingly digital. We also use an increasing number of digital channels, but we can't ignore the fact that not everybody uses the internet, not everybody's on social media. Ultimately, we need to try and give people the information that they require in the format that they prefer. Got a big project starting on the overhaul of the council website shortly, which will bring big improvement to that, and we'll see us be able to perform lots more tasks digitally, and we'll be able to present the work that we do in a much more engaging fashion. We're looking at new formats as well. A medium-term aim of mine is that we launch a Middlesbrough podcast that is, yes, led by the council, but about businesses, organisations all around the town. We're looking into voice recognition technology, so that might mean that you can ask your Amazon device to remind you of your bin day or other information that you need linked to the council. Other authorities do that. We're looking into doing the same. We need to evaluate what we do more closely to make sure that we do more of what works and less of what doesn't. A good example of that would be our e-newsletter, which now goes to around 18,000 residents. The technology behind that allows us to assess in real close detail what the most popular links were within that newsletter, how long people spent reading it, and so on and so forth. It really allows us to tailor the product for future editions, and we need to do that across all of our work, really. And the bottom line is that if we do our job properly, then those strategic priorities that we referenced on an earlier slide will become clearer to everyone, whether it be staff, members, and ultimately people out in the wider world. Internal communications is obviously very important. We are looking at a piece of work around that at the moment. I said earlier that our staff and members can be our strongest ambassadors, really. We need to recognise the great work that our staff do and share their stories both internally and externally. We do need to build understanding of the strategic priorities, why we're here and what we're aiming to do on a daily basis. And hand in hand with that is our values and how they underpin everything that we do. At the moment, while the majority of us are working from home, it's obviously dead important that we share information with staff on a regular basis, encourage them to take time out to support each other from a health and well-being point of view. And that work is continuing, and we're learning quite a lot about how our staff interact with us, but while many of them do work from home. So this delivery plan has been presented to directors, and the next step really is that once those strategic priorities are finalised, we'll work with each directorate on on a dedicated work plan that'll put timeframes on what we're going to deliver and how we're going to do it. We'll work with HR on a survey around internal communications. Is what we do now appropriate? Is it worthwhile? Do we need to look at other formats? And finally, and I guess most relevant to members today, is there will also be an appendix on how the team can support ward members. So a couple of weeks ago, I distributed a draft, really an overview of who we are, what we can do, and how we can support ward members to each of the group leaders. And based on feedback from that exercise and possibly conversations that we'll have today, we will settle on a very brief document that will kind of set out how we can interact with ward members and the services that we can provide. So that, in a nutshell, is an overview of the delivery plan that will go hand in hand with the refreshed strategic plan. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew, for that detailed and very comprehensive presentation. Before I bring anyone in to ask questions, Tony, do you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Chair. Not really, but just to say that the function does report directly to me, which I think underlines its importance. And that was a deliberate move so that there was a single line of accountability, because under previous arrangements, the previous post holder to Andrew, I think, was pulled in several different directions, which didn't help the function. But I think Andrew's presentation gives the detail. You know, in essence, we want to be more proactive with our marketing and comms. I think we're very good when we're on the back foot, and we're very good at getting messages and media releases out through the Gazette. But the world out there has changed, and I think tying the marketing and comms function more closely to what we're trying to achieve as a council and reaching other people through digital platforms and being more proactive is the right way to go. But obviously, I would be interested to hear the views of the Scrutiny Committee.
Right, thank you, Tony. I'll take Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Coop. Councillor Mackay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Through you. Can I just say, Tony and Andrew, I've always found Angus Hoy was the only person I really knew in that department, because I knew him from when I worked at the Gazette. But I've dealt with him for a long time now and never had any problems. Never. I'm not no disrespect to you, Andrew. I just don't know you. But I've found that department very good. I've never had a problem with it. I've gone to Angus if I've needed anything, and he's sort of been the middleman at the Gazette for me. I think we do a first-class service. Thank you.
I welcome that feedback, Councillor McTighe. Sure to be to pass it on to Angus.
Thank you.
Councillor Coop, did you have a question?
Yes, just Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate the extra things you're doing now, giving all the press releases. I think some of the time the councillors was that kept in the dark on purpose, but sometimes we didn't quite know what was going to happen. So I think it's important that we're doing that now and just keep us informed about some big events, because otherwise it comes as much as a surprise to us as it does to the public. So I do appreciate that. I think it's quite important. Thank you.
Andrew, do you want to respond to that?
No, just to say really that was a simple change to make sure that members were aware of the information that we were putting into the public domain. I mean, that happens automatically when we send out a media release, and there are other instances where we will attempt to give you more notice than that, or where we need input. But yeah, I'm glad that's been well received.
Just to add to that, Chair, can I just add to that? I think it's good if that happens, but certainly what I'm impressing on the directors is that there should be engagement with ward members before the item even gets to the marketing team. You know, the ward members should be involved in an initiative within their ward and know what's going on way before we get to a media release.
Absolutely, Tony, and I think everybody in this room would agree with that. I've got Councillor Cooper, then Councillor Story, and then Councillor Rooney. So I'll take Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, communications. Does this involve surveys with the general public? And if so, what sort of success are we having with that? Basically, I got a report yesterday that a survey had been done, not just by ourselves, but by our other authorities around us, and the response had been 181. I would have expected a response like that to come from our ward alone, let alone the full area. So I'm just wondering how we're doing on public surveys. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. The marketing and comms function don't handle those sorts of surveys and consultations. They're covered by the strategy and policy unit that sits under Charlotte Benjamin. And I think it's fair to say that, you know, if you look at the strategic plan in the way that we're developing it, we want far greater public involvement than we manage to get at the moment. So Paul Stevens, through Charlotte Benjamin, will be bringing a report that looks at how we can better engage the public through a whole range of mechanisms so that they have more of a say on our priorities and more of a say on how well we're doing delivering. That is an area of focus for us.
I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, Andrew, do you?
I was just going to ask Councillor Cooper if he knew which survey that was. I know our big one that's out at the moment is on the budget and the strategic priorities. And the last update I had was that we'd had just over 300 responses, I think, with a few days to go, which is admittedly down on last year, but I'm sure members would agree that there are perhaps items, not as many items which have led to debate in this year's budget consultation as there were last year.
Councillor Cooper, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, actually, it was the Police and Crime Commissioner's finances that we were discussing, and we're having another meeting to discuss this a bit further before the report is submitted. But it was put out as a survey, and I was one of the 181 people that filled it in. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'll move to Councillor Story. Councillor Story, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just briefly, just to follow up on what Tony said, I'm really pleased that Tony said that, because I think that what members shouldn't just be getting press releases as and when something's coming forward. We should be informed in advance as wherever possible. And there have been several occasions in our ward where there's obviously lots of development goes on in Central Ward, where with things like Bovo X, College Art and Design development, and also the new urban park, where we've had to press to find out information after the press has already received the details of what's been going on. And I think in future, if we can be pre-briefed and kept informed, obviously those are all things that we're very supportive of. There's no controversy there at all. It's just important that we get a picture of what's happening prior, wherever possible. What I wanted to really reference was essentially to, when we're looking at this review, to talk about the kind of primacy of the council's in-house communications department, because I think too often decisions that are taken or policies of the council are announced through other means first. And primarily I'm thinking of the mayor's personal Facebook page. We often see things announced there before even officers or the comms department have actually had reference to those things, and then we're playing catch up as the council's official communications organs. And I'm thinking particularly in terms of the park situation at the start of COVID. A lot of that was done ad hoc by the mayor, and then the council was playing catch up. It really needs to be formalised that the mayor is leader of the council, but any other executive members as well. The council's communications needs to take primacy. It needs to go through the council's official channels first. That's where people need to get their news from. And then elected members and the mayor and others are perfectly entitled to share that information and promote that information as much as they like. But it has to go through a formal communications process first, because that's where the information needs to come from. And I think as elected members, we often get frustrated because sometimes we'll clock something on Facebook and think, well, that's the first we've heard of it. I think officers sometimes find that the same, and it's not the best way to do business. So I think however we go forward with communications, we need to make sure that that's formalised, that the council's comms is where all of the communications in terms of what the council is doing needs to sit, and then we can then disseminate that information however we see fit. but it needs to come from comms first, and elected members need to buy into that.
Tony, do you want to respond first and then Andrew?
I agree with Councillor Story that the primacy should be with the council communications, the formal council communications, and then any kind of individual posts or such like should be made on the back of that. We all know that that's not necessarily how it always happens at this point in time. If I'm honest, I'm not sure how that can be changed. I don't know, if there's a policy that can be agreed or a concordat between members, but without anything to kind of provide parameters, without a framework, which I don't think there is one at the moment, then it's not something that officers can really control. We can't control what individual members determine they want to put out on their private social media account. But I get the frustration.
Andrew, do you want to add to that?
Just to say, really, Chair, that we are having a big push on being more of a news outlet on the council's social media channels. But yeah, to agree with what Tony said, I don't think we're ever going to have absolute control over what individual members post on their own accounts, and neither should we.
Tony, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, Chair, I was going to say perhaps one of the things that we might look to do is to produce a session, a masterclass or whatever for members, because I think when I've seen posts from members, sometimes, it kind of reads almost as if the council has made a decision when it hasn't, and what the individual concerned in any particular case is actually posting about is an intention to seek a decision from the council, but it reads as if a decision from the council has been made, for example. So personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with a politician saying, my ambition is to, and I intend to go through this route. And perhaps sometimes if we can't stop the media posts going out, we can at least get them structured in a way that doesn't make it look or sound like there's been a council decision to do something when in fact we haven't been through the governance process.
Councillor Story, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm not insisting that. I don't think council officers can demand that elected members do particular things with comms. What I'm trying to say is that in the course of this review, I think we just need to make sure that elected members, and as Tony says, perhaps training and masterclasses or some kind of opportunity for members to understand better how comms should work would help. Just for members to understand that the council's communications belong to everybody, and that as we see information come out about policies at the council, that's where that needs to sit. And you can't demand things from elected members in that respect. I understand that, but I think however we can define protocols around that so people understand better what's expected of them, I think we would find that more comfortable as elected members, rather than clocking things at random on social media posts and then seeing the council play catch up, because I don't think anybody thinks that's the best way for comms to be managed in a town. That's my point really, but thanks for the responses.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rooney and then I've got Councillor Rathmell, so I'll take Councillor Rooney.
Thanks, Chair. I think Matt's covered most of what I wanted to say, and I was really heartened to hear about the positive perceptions about how we're trying to get our messages out to the public. And I really like the idea of working with the Directorate's work plan so that information comes out in a consistent way. The control on the Middlesbrough Council platforms, I think, is really important, because that it sends out a clear message that it's the local authority that's saying this, and it's a decision that's been reached, or we're asking for information. And it also helps prevent trolling and abusive comments coming back, which we can't control on other platforms, and that is detrimental to the authority. You said, Tony, that the function reports directly to you. I was just wondering, where does the executive function sit with all of this? Because we did notice that the mayor has actually put something in his portfolio that said he's now responsible for marketing and communications. Now, my email to him after the council meeting was around, that's a strategic function, that he should be responsible for the strategic function, and that was being put forward as an operational thing, whereas I think the operational responsibilities fall within the local authority officers, and I don't know whether anybody's got anything to say on how that's operating. Thank you.
Tony, do you want to come in, and then Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Rooney. So you're absolutely right. You know, operational responsibility and to some degree strategic responsibility for marketing and comms lies with officers, as it does with every other function. The executive political responsibility lies with the mayor.
Andrew, do you want to add anything to that?
Nothing to add to that, Chair.
All right, thank you. I've got Councillor Rathmell and then I've got Councillor McTighe, so I'll take Councillor Rathmell.
Yeah, just a few points. I mean, with regards to the communications, obviously you've acknowledged that social media seems to be the driving force at the moment and the way forward. It's where most people engage. If you're looking at doing any kind of training, then I think it needs to be a two-way street, involving members and perhaps teaching them how to use social media, not responsibly, because every message the council puts out, it'd be wrong for us politically to agree with. It's always going to be the case and there's always going to be disagreements. But I know that I have mine set up with notifications. So everything that goes out on any Middlesbrough Council platform, I get a notification of. And then if it's a formal message like the voting by post and the postal votes, share it and it's consistent and it reaches more people. As for the concerns raised about other platforms that are being used, political platforms, I think if we have a bit more consistency, people will realise that pages like T's Issues are perhaps powered by pixie dust rather than fact on occasion, and it would make things a lot easier. But I'm wondering if there could be something incorporated into the members' code of conduct, not to handcuff people, but just to have a consistent message, because it's all too easy. I mean, I'm a sod for it. I'll be honest. Potholes, biggest gripe on the planet. My view, pothole strategy hasn't worked. The council's message is they're doing a great job. My message is, well, if they're doing such a great job, why are all these potholes? And the reach on that in 2 days has been over 100,000 and loads of engagement. But there are a lot of instances whereby we can have different opinions, that's fine, but there's a lot of consistent messages that we want to push. Postal votes is a good example. And then when there's a change with COVID and all the information and the way services are operating, if members aren't getting the notifications, some members don't know how to look or search on social media to find that message, to share it. And I'm just thinking, it would be wise if there was some kind of training for members to show them how to link up so that they can follow and get notifications when things are filtered out on the council channels. Like I say, we're not going to agree on everything. We're all going to have different views, but there's sensible messages, COVID messages that need to be shared. And that's just a good example of how it could be more consistent and pushed to a wider audience rather than just on the councils, which the figures are probably a lot better than they were on the social media, but they're still very low. And obviously it's something you want to drive up and encourage. That's just my view.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Rathmell. I think training is something we should look at. So I'll take that up with group leaders and suggest maybe what the programme could include, and then get some feedback from members as well on what else you'd like to know. All shares of official council information are clearly welcome, like you say, whether it be a campaigning thing around registering to vote by post, COVID information. We had important information on floods last week. All of that is welcome and appreciated. In terms of the point around the code of conduct, I'm not sure I'm best placed to answer that one.
Tony, do you want to come in on that one?
Well, sorry, but if I'll pass that sideways, because I noticed Charlotte's on the call, so she's probably the best person to comment on that, Chair.
Charlotte, do you want to come in on that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I picked up Councillor Rathmell, your point. I wonder if you could say more about what you think could be incorporated into the code of conduct?
It doesn't have to be anything exceptionally special. It should just be something along the lines of the types of language used, because I've noticed that some of the posts that have gone on, well, on certain posts, I won't say, perhaps incite language that you would consider inappropriate or abuse towards politicians with opposing views. And it's not necessarily welcome. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, that's part of the standards and the current process. But if that isn't registering, the penny isn't dropping with some members, and perhaps something needs to be done and incorporated into that so that the message gets across as to how to behave on social media, what to say on social media. I mean, you can disagree with the political decision, you can disagree with the council decision. How you put it across has very different ramifications. One can invite public opinion, the other one can invite personal attacks on individuals. And I mean, I think Councillor Rooney, Councillor Story will say that we've had our disagreements, but some of the posts and responses that I've seen on social media targeted towards their group members, that's overstepping the line, but that's clearly been incited by the language used on some exec posts or mayoral posts. And it needs sort of nipping in the bud, because we're not in a playground where you incite name calling.
I'll put Charlotte in on that. I think there's probably some food for thought there. So I don't know whether you want to respond to that, Charlotte, or...
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Rathmell, like, you did anticipate what I was going to say about sometimes activity on social media being representative of kind of interaction generally. However, I think it's right to say that the current code is due for a refresh. So the current code doesn't particularly mention social media specifically, and given, as you've acknowledged, Councillor Rathmell, the level of activity now on social media, it's really the main platform for interaction, I think. We have reviewed the code of conduct. There's a model code that's come out as well that we have been looking at against our proposed draft new code, which will need to come through the relevant committees and obviously eventually would be put before council for approval. So that's a work in progress. I think we're nearly at the point now where we can bring that to councillors' attention through the standards committee and then through Constitution Member Development Committee to get that to council, because in summary, you're right, Councillor Rathmell, the code as it stands doesn't specifically give the reference to social media that I think is warranted now, given that high profile nature of social media activity.
So it sounds like it's in hand then.
It is, yeah.
So I didn't know whether you want to come back on that, because I've got Councillor McTighe and then Councillor Rooney. So I'll take Councillor McTighe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back quickly to Councillor Rooney, when she mentioned that she'd sent an email to the mayor pointing out one or two things. I just wondered what his reply was, please. And before you answer, if I could just go back to Charlotte. Yes, I welcome the changes and hopefully the improvements in the I've forgotten the word now. Standards, you know, what you can do, etc. Because I think that for an executive councillor to refer to another councillor on Facebook as rotten, evil, and a liar is crossing the line, and something really should be done to stop that sort of thing. Basically, what sort of an impression does that give to the rest of the town, or anybody reading it, for example? These are the people that are making major decisions for our town, and this is how they speak on social media. So I welcome it greatly. Thank you, Chair.
I think we all welcome that's going to be re-looked at and refreshed, because it's not before time, but I think you're absolutely right. I'll bring in Councillor Rooney. Councillor Rooney.
Yeah, thanks. To respond to Councillor McTeague's question, the only response I got from the mayor was that he would give it some thought, and I've heard nothing since.
Thank you.
And that was following a council meeting, and my email to him went on the 3rd of September. So that gives you a time scale for that. In terms of what Tony said earlier on about a framework, I think this is something that we should explore as well. I mean, there's one side of it looking at what the council's behaviour should be. And as somebody who suffered more than 2 to 3 years of consistent attacks on social media from a platform that's purported to be linked to Middlesbrough Council, but we all knew it was a spoof one, I know how damaging this can be. So I'm speaking from a personal perspective as well here. Now, if we have a framework, I feel quite passionately that the information that goes out, whatever platform it goes on, is accurate and links back to local authority decisions, not local authority or individual members' opinions, unless it is expressly stated that it is an opinion. And I think that is one thing that we can try and control, to make sure that members of the public get a consistent message that this is what the council is doing, and it has been agreed by councillors of all parties across the local authority, and opposed to this is what I think or this is what I am going to do. And I think if we can consistently get that message across, then we can go some way to making sure that the members and residents of Middlesbrough are informed properly. Thank you.
Before I bring Tony in, can I just ask Councillor McTighe, can you just mute yourself, please? Thank you. Tony, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a framework is a good idea, you know, and then how people behave within that framework is then another matter, isn't it? But I think something that provides members with a little bit more direction as to what and how matters should be posted would be helpful, and that's certainly something we can work on and then get approval for and deliver out through this kind of training package, these masterclasses that we've talked about.
Andrew, do you want to come in on that, on the back of that, and add to it?
Don't think I've got anything to add to that, Chair.
Thank you for that. Have we got any more questions? No? Everybody happy? Well, can I thank Andrew, Tony and Charlotte for your input to this very positive meeting, and we've got food for thought to take away from this meeting. So thank you, and you're more than welcome to stay, but if you want to go, that's fine, and we're just going to be moving on the agenda. So thank you once again for your attendance. Right, move on. The next thing on the agenda is any other urgent items, which I don't have. So I'd just like to thank everyone for your attendance and just say goodbye.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. It's been a good meeting.